We invited Bryant, the Lakers, and the NBA to comment or join us today. Each declined to comment. Not, though, to discuss, nonetheless, with Professor Robert Thompson, who is a professor of television and popular culture at Syracuse University. Joining us via the Cisco telepresence is Sundance DiGiovanni. He is the founder of Major League Gaming. Bomani Jones is host of The Morning Jones on Sirius XM Radio. Adam Fussfeld contributes to the BusinessInsider.com website, and Dr. David Maeda is a sociologist who has written on the military aspect of Bryant and this commercial. It is good to have you all here. Bob Thompson, let me begin with you. What do you find more fascinating, the issue that Bryant is in this commercial or the sudden discussion around it?
Surprised me that much. I think the first thing we have to remember, though, is there is a difference between people getting caught with weapons and using weapons and shot with weapons and that kind of thing happening in fiction, whether it's a novel, a movie, or a video game. And to align those together, to somehow say that Kobe Bryant, by appearing on a commercial for a first-person shooter video game, is somehow promoting the kinds of activities that go on that game, I guess would mean that any actor that's ever starred as a bad guy in a film, you know, should get the same kind of treatment. We really have to be careful how we make those associations. All right,
Bomani, I know you see other issues here, not necessarily the promotion of all the activities here, but how do you parse this with the face of the NBA? He's #1 in jersey sales, Kobe Bryant, and the discussion we've heard over the last day or so.
Well, the first thing is that it is very uncommon, at least as far as I can tell, to see someone that's a mainstream star like Kobe Bryant endorse a product that is deemed inappropriate for children. That's the first thing to see. You don't see that very often. But the part that confuses me is that violence is violence is violence, and we seem to have a way of kind of parsing out which kind of violence we think is okay. War is hell, or so goes the saying that people will tell you, but this game and Kobe Bryant's presence in it, that sits funny with me, but it also sits funny with the consistency with the NBA. It was 10 years ago that Allen Iverson put out a rap album that was considered to be a little bit too violent, and that was a big reason that David Stern called him in to have a chat with him about that. I have a hard time seeing what is different about that album in this video game.
Well, now the NBA, they're standing by the position that this is Bryant's position, his personal endorsement. In fact, the Lakers took the same position in declining to appear with us today. So, Bomani, what would you suggest the league be doing here?
Well, I guess my question still is, and I get it was 10 years ago for a lot of people, but this still sticks with me. Where was that position 10 years ago when Iverson decided to put out this album? What frustrates me is how this ties with the NBA, in that you see these principled stands about something like violence when the populace seems to be afraid of what's going on with the players. But this video game sells a whole lot of copies, so there's no need to make any complaint, or there's no need to shut it down because of how popular it is in the mainstream. But it's hard to avoid the inconsistency in the way the NBA handles these image issues with its players.
Let's try to get, with Adam Fussfeld, just a sense of perspective here. We've seen numbers that it's done, what, over $600 million in its first 5 days. Give me some perspective in the gaming industry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the game has sold a record $650 million worth of sales, in the first 5 years. And, you know, I think in reference to what Bomani Jones said, you know, Allen Iverson, when he came out with that album, it was very much, this is him, like, keeping it real or whatever. But this commercial is clearly a fantasy. I mean, that's the whole purpose behind the commercial. Is you have a hotel concierge answering his phone in the middle of the commercial. You have women in heels running around. I think that's what makes this commercial, you know, not such an issue of violence and anything like that. It's clearly representing a video game, which is fantasy, as we've mentioned.
Well, let me ask Sundance.
May I jump in, Bob?
Go right ahead.
Hi, this is Dr. Maeda. I wanted to speak because I thought what Bomani Jones said on the first intent segment, he said very eloquently what I'd like to say, just using kind of different terminology. And there's a term we use in sociology called permissible violence. And that suggests that with kind of shifting political trends and information technology and changing media, there are certain types of violence that become permissible in our society, and other types of violence that become impermissible. So the analogy Bomani used when saying that Grand Theft Auto, if Bryant and Jimmy Kimmel and all these other actors were emulating street violence, I mean physical assaults and homicides and motor vehicle theft, that would be impermissible or considered deviant, and would render a lot more kind of resistance from the society and league and maybe even the commissioner. But we're currently engaged in war. I mean, we are kind of in a subsiding war in Iraq. an escalating war in Afghanistan, and so the general kind of American climate is to not only support our troops, but to support the war, or at least not to question the war. And so when you have these video games that make war look cool, it's true, they are fantasy, but I think they add to an overall culture that kind of perpetuates this understanding that we shouldn't question war and the social problems that are attendant with war.
Let me ask Sundance the question.
We should point out, too, that...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, we should point out, too, that the U.S. Army has been engaged in creating video games with these first-person shooters playing war games as part of their recruitment since 2002. You can go to America's Army and you can play these games that are actually not only given the blessing of the Army, but they're the ones that created them. So we've got a long tradition of this kind of thing that comes right from the federal government itself.
Sundance, let me ask you what you make of the parsing of your industry that there's permissible and impermissible violence.
Well, that's entertainment in general. I mean, the big problem is, unfortunately, children have an easy time separating fantasy from reality, but adults seem to lose that ability as they age. Kobe Bryant is a spokesperson. He did not make this game. Allen Iverson made that album. The only problem I would have with this commercial is if Kobe Bryant didn't actually play the game. But he participates in the community activity of getting on every night on Xbox Live or PlayStation Network and playing against like-minded people who are looking to disengage from their day-to-day. The fact that he makes millions of dollars playing basketball, in essence, what this commercial says, makes him no different than the concierge or the woman with the shotgun who breaches the door. The fact of it is that, yes, violence is awful. Violence in real life is much different, however, than violence in video games. And what this commercial does is it says, the tagline is there's a soldier in all of us. It's not saying that it wants everyone to run out and go to war, but it's saying that you can play this game, you can be part of this community, and that it's something that people of all walks of life are part of. To draw it to a deeper conclusion that they're saying Kobe Bryant is perpetuating violence or Jimmy Kimmel is perpetuating violence and wants you to do that as well, or that it's a recruitment, I think is just silly. I think it's ludicrous because, again, this is also a mature-rated game. It's for adults. The target, the audience, is adults.
Now, you mentioned Jimmy Kimmel and some of the screen grabs that we've shown from websites. You see Jimmy Kimmel mentioned in as many headlines. And if you have not seen the commercial, not had a chance to Google it yet, Kobe Black Ops, Kimmel is in the commercial. He has a bazooka. He's the payoff at the end of this commercial. Bomani, why is no one raising questions within the Walt Disney Company that I know of, or even outside of why Jimmy Kimmel's in the spot, but Kobe Bryant's participation is a question?
We play sports a little bit differently, and there are all kinds of things that if you're not an athlete that you could probably endorse and get away with, but athletes are typically seen as endorsing what you would consider to be more wholesome products. That's why this is a big shift. But the idea, though, that Kobe Bryant did not make the game, therefore he's not promoting what is behind the game is mind-blowing to me. If you are a spokesman for something, then you are speaking for it. So it seems impossible to divorce Kobe Bryant from what is going on with the game. And while you say there may be a soldier in all of us, we've got a real tricky sort of hypocrisy about when we're okay with people making references to war and when they're not. There's a little soldier in Kellen Winslow, too, and he's been a laughingstock for something he said when he was 19 years old as a byproduct of that. I mean, we've got to get this right. And Kobe Bryant, to put it on him personally would be unfair, but he's right in the middle of this.
Sundance.
But I agree. But again, the difference, you bring up the Allen Iverson issue. 10 years ago, Allen Iverson recorded an album where he used language indicating that he was a thug, carried a gun, was involved with drugs. Kobe Bryant is in a commercial which perpetuates the fact that people of all walks of life can lose the stresses of their day by playing a game together. The fact that the game involves violence is the issue that you have. But the fact that he didn't, again, he's not saying, I do this in real life. Allen Iverson said that in his album. What he's saying is that I get down with these people, I play the same game.
Do you really believe in the year 2000 that Allen Iverson was doing the things that he described on that album?
I don't believe half of the rappers out there who say they do these things.
If you don't believe he's doing it, then you would then also have to say that that in large measure is also engaging in fantasy. They're the same thing. Unless you think that Allen Iverson was giving, unless you were giving him he was giving a diary or dictation of his daily activities, then I don't understand the point.
No, I agree with you, but
the point is down to fantasy versus reality, and also the impact on kids. I'm going to ask you gentlemen just to stand by for a question for a moment. I'd like to introduce into our discussion Todd Walker. He is a youth football coach in Berkeley, California. By profession, though, he is a mortician, and to make the point to his youngsters whom he coaches about the dangers of the violence that can befall them on the street, Todd Walker brings his kids into his funeral home and tries to literally scare them straight. Tim Kuhn of ESPN, the magazine, reported on it recently.
Each year, Walker brings his football team to his office.